Let's get a check of our top business news stories now. Our business editor, Kate Moody's here. Hi there, Kate.
Hi, Tom.
Now, let's begin with a report you're looking at with regards to the prospects for economic growth and recovery in Africa.
Yeah, Sub-Saharan Africa is set to emerge from recession this year, but the recovery there is still vulnerable. That's the headline from the World Bank's latest Africa's Pulse survey. It projects that GDP across Sub-Saharan Africa will expand 3.3% in 2021. That's more than its initial forecast earlier this year. Inflation is set to hit 4.3%. That's still within the target range that's been set by most of the region's central banks. Governments have spent around 2.8% of GDP on COVID-related support measures. That's just a fraction of the approximately 17% that's been devoted by more advanced economies. Overall risks to economic growth remain tilted to the downside. Well, let's cross to Washington now and speak to Axel van Trotsenburg, Managing Director of Operations at the World Bank. Thanks for being with us on France 24 this evening. This report once again highlights the unequal economic recovery that we're seeing around the world. And one of the major factors here is the slow vaccine rollout across the African continent.
That is correct. So we have some positive news that growth is resuming after the first recession in decades last year in Africa. But as you said, the vaccine rollout is highly unequal. Just to give you a number, currently only 3.3% of the African population have been fully vaccinated, and that compares to over 60% in the rich countries. And this is a problem for the recovery, and therefore our demand and our recommendation is that we need to step up the rollout in Africa to get 40% of the population fully vaccinated by the end of the year. This is a challenge, it's doable, and we need to make an international effort to make this happen.
The price of food and fuel is also rising. How concerned is the World Bank about the pace of inflation?
We are concerned, and particularly when the prices rise, it always affects the most vulnerable and the poorest. And therefore, there is a rising food insecurity around the world, and particularly in Africa. So we should be concerned. We have been responding to this by increasing social protection programs. In general, the bank has been stepping up our support program to Africa massively. Currently, we provide about $30 billion per year in financial support to Africa. That's about 45% of our total lending volumes in the world. And this is increasing. And we need to focus on those areas, particularly that affects the poorest of the poor.
Public debt has also been rising for many African governments, even before the pandemic. How big a problem is this going forward?
Well, we have been concerned about the rising debt levels, and for that, and since the outbreak of the crisis, we have had a moratorium in place for bilateral as well as private sector debts. This is going to expire at the end of the year, and what we are calling for is that we need to deal with this in a systematic fashion, and these countries need continued debt treatment and relief because the recovery is still very, very weak, and resources are needed for urgently needed social expenditures.
Now, the African Continental Free Trade Area officially took effect this January. Has it shown any signs of affecting regional economic resilience, or has the pandemic essentially strangled that impact with border closures and things of that nature?
I think, unfortunately, this regional integration is absolutely important and bears a lot of promise for the future. However, the pandemic has really made this in the beginning difficult because, indeed, trade has been negatively affected by this pandemic. We should, however, have a long-term look. This is something that we need to support. And in general, we are promoting strongly for much more regional integration in Africa, as you could have actually from those efforts an economic stimulus that benefit jobs creation and economic growth.
Axel van Trotsenburg, thanks so much for joining us from the World Bank today.
Thank you.
The benchmark for European natural gas has risen 60% in just 2 days. It's up 400% since the start of the year. The price of natural gas to be delivered next month briefly topped 155 euros per megawatt hour today. In January, it cost around 17 euros. Prices then dropped, trading closer to about 105 euros now. This after Russian President Vladimir Putin suggested he could increase deliveries of natural gas to Europe. But the volatility does underscore the pressure that's being put on the energy market and why consumers and governments alike are concerned about the upcoming winter period. Moving on to some of the day's other business headlines now. Google will invest $1 billion in improving Africa's internet access and startup industry. Part of that funding is devoted to a subsea cable to ramp up high-speed connections. The World Bank says less than a third of the African population has reliable broadband access. Apple could be set to face another European legal battle. Reuters reports that EU antitrust regulators are preparing a case over its NFC chip technology, which runs its mobile payment system. The European Commission already has 3 other cases against Apple. And General Motors wants to challenge Tesla as the leader in electric vehicle production. The American car giant laid out an ambitious roadmap for transformation, which includes a goal of doubling its annual revenue over the next decade and a renewed focus on electric and hybrid technology. France's Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire says world powers are on the brink of a corporate tax deal. An announcement could come as early as Friday or by the end of this month. Getting Ireland on board has been a turning point in the long drawn-out negotiations, as Monty Francis reports.
After a decade of negotiations, world powers are said to be closing in on a deal for a global corporate tax rate, ahead of an announcement from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD, on Friday. Countries who together represent 90% of the world's economy are set to announce a minimum corporate tax rate of 15%. French Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire said the final details were still being ironed out, but sounded confident, saying in an interview, "I'm fully determined to pave the way for a consensus because we are 1 millimeter away from a global agreement." With one of the lowest corporate tax rates, Ireland was one of 9 countries who refused to sign on to the pact back in July, but sources say it's now ready to come on board. Other holdouts, including EU members Hungary and Estonia, show no sign of budging and would stay outside of the deal. The objective of the pact is to stop firms from moving profits to tax havens.
The OECD estimates that corporate tax avoidance costs anywhere from $100 billion to $240 billion every single year.
The deal includes 2 pillars. Pillar 1 establishes that profits are taxed in the countries where they are made, affecting the biggest multinational companies. Pillar 2 establishes the minimum global corporate tax rate of 15%. If agreed upon, the deal still faces hurdles, needing the approval of each country's legislature.
All right, lots of developments to come in the coming days there, Tom.
Looks like it. Thank you very much indeed, our business editor, Kate Moody. Thank you for bringing us up to